Absolutely. Well, that's great. I see we're at the top of the hour. I like to be timely on these things. So welcome, everybody, to the 10th IFSCC webinar. We started these back in April, and wow, we've already got 10 under our belt. We do this every 2 weeks, and today we're doing something a little bit different. Rather than having a specific presentation, we are going to just answer your formulation questions. And we've got two experts in the area of natural formulating and green formulating. So a lot of the flavor of the questions will be about those kinds of questions. However, I will say we pretty much will answer any question. But first, let me introduce you to Mary Lynn Hallen. She is the Secretariat of the IFSCC. Yeah, no problem.
So just a brief introduction. What is the IFSCC? We are the International Federation of Societies of Cosmetic Chemists. We're a worldwide federation of 49 national societies, and I'm very happy to say we should have another one joining us in the fall, in just another month. We're dedicated to international cooperation in cosmetic science and technology. To find a society in your country, go to our website, which is ifscc.org, and look for member societies. So just a few overviews of our individual member benefits. We have an IFSCC magazine we issue 4 times a year. You can also submit papers to the IFSCC magazine. We have COSMET, which is the only cosmetic science database in the world. It's only for cosmetic science. We have almost 100,000 entries. We have a virtual library with webinars, so you'll be able to find today's webinar recorded and posted at ifscc.org. We also have other videos and a virtual library of reference books, our magazine going back to the year 2000, posters and podiums from our congresses and conferences starting in 1995. So a wealth of information. We also offer awards to young scientists. We want to encourage people to join our industry and stick with it. Like Judi did and Art, they stumbled into something and here they are a couple of years later. We host on-site educational programs normally. However, during COVID, of course, we've switched to online, which is how we find ourselves here today. And if you're a member of one of our member societies, you get discounted registration to our Congress or conference. And that always is more than what you'd pay just, so you save more than the amount of your membership on the registration fee. So that's a quick overview of the IFSCC, who we are and what we do.
All right, thank you so much for that, Mary Lynn. All right, and now I just want to go quickly over just a short few slides here, just to show you, to describe what we're doing today. Then we'll introduce Art and Judi, and then we'll get started answering your questions. So today is our cosmetic formulating question and answer session. This is the topics that we're going to cover. So you have the questions. So we're going to focus on these. We're looking at ingredients, formulation advice. If you have questions about production, we can talk about that. We'll talk about resources and whatever you put up there, questions that are live, we're going to try to cover those also. I just want to set up front here some of the limitations that we have when about what we can and can't answer. Now, both Art and Judi are consultants, and they do make a living out of helping people, answering questions like this, and helping people with formulation. So I want you to keep that in mind when you're asking your questions. And of course, we're going to share all of their contact information. And so if you need some work, if you want to work with them directly, that you'll be able to contact them directly. Some of the things we can't answer, full formulation troubleshooting. So if you have a formula and you just say, how do I make this work? That's a little bit too involved for this kind of webinar. We're also not giving out free formulas. There are sources for free formulations. I will share that in the chat, but we're not going to be talking about giving free formulas here. We also need specific questions. There are a lot, vague questions like what's the best preservative? It's just a little bit too vague. We can't really answer vague questions. And we're not going to be giving you specific regulatory or legal advice. We are formulators. We're not lawyers. And at least I'm hesitant to say those things. And finally, this disclaimer, answers, they're all based on our professional experience and education. This is not an implicit guarantee that everything we say is going to work for you. We're just here to share our experience and our advice. So don't take this as gospel. So, with all of that said, why don't we introduce our experts? With us today is Judi Beerling. Judi has been a passionate cosmetic formulator for her whole career and spent much of the last 15 years and her knowledge in this rapidly evolving area of green formulation and sustainability. Prior to that, she spent a lot of time working in the fragrance industry and on fragrance applications. And apart from running a formulation laboratory, she has lectured and given workshops around the world, specifically for the IFSCC. Thank you. And her consulting work has nurtured a number of international companies, small and large, in the quest to become greener. Hello, Judi. Judi, you also are part of the SCS upcoming conference. You have some information about that?
Yeah, so it's actually the IFSCC Congress in 2022. Do you have the slide, Perry?
I do not.
I sent to you the announcement.
We'll try to get that before this is up, but I don't have that right now. But we'll put that up as soon as we can get it.
Okay, I can find it as well whilst somebody else is talking. So yeah, basically, I'm sure it's going to take over a lot of my life over the next 2 years. It's going to be, we've had these events every 2 years. It will be every year after us in London in 2022, but big major scientific congresses where people come together to share, their work, their knowledge, and to network with other like-minded professionals and academics, people in every walk of cosmetic science. So it's going to be a big event, and London, hopefully it's going to be very enjoyable as well.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that, especially people getting back together. So look forward to that. Art Georgalas, he has decades of experience in formulation work in color cosmetics, toiletries, skin and sun care, and hair care. He's pretty much formulated everything. He's worked at companies like Revlon, Cholton, Charles of the Ritz, Dow Brands, and Lamar, plus many contract manufacturers. He's also an adjunct professor in the cosmetic science program at Fairleigh Dickinson University, one of the best programs worldwide, I would say. And he has specifically taught courses in botanicals and cosmetic formulations for the SEC Continuing Education Program. Thank you both for coming on. Are we ready to answer some questions?
Thank you for inviting us, Barry.
All right.
We'll give it a good go.
Well, we got a number of questions that were sent in, and we're gonna cover those. If we don't get to those, we have the answers and we have your email, and we can send that to you. But I want to start off with the first question that comes to us specifically about the industry, and this question comes from Nupur. She says, "What is the difference between green formulations and clean formulations?"
Yeah.
Why don't you start with that one, Judi?
Okay. It's a really difficult thing because neither of them is defined. So normally you have a definition for things and you can compare the two. And I often start my workshops that I do by getting the participants in the audience to define it, because it's what it means to you, not to anybody else, really. I always say to companies I work with, have your own sort of code of ethics, what clean or green or whatever you're going to call yourself means to you, so that if people ask the questions, you have the answers. This is, I'm saying this is a green formulation because in Europe, of course, it's a different scenario to in many other places where we have regulations. So clean tends to mean, I think in the US, a lot of it is about ingredients, toxicity, perceived issues with different things. Whereas in the EU, of course, everything should have been safety assessed before it goes onto the market. So there should not be any toxic ingredients or toxic products out there. And it drives me crazy when people start talking to me about, it's not toxic. Well, no, it can't be. It's by definition.
Of course, I still see people making cruelty-free claims in the EU too, and animal testing has been banned there for years.
Yes,
yeah. And that is, again, if you put that on, I mean, cruelty-free is slightly different. If you use the logo, can kind of get away with it, but actually saying it's actually illegal to say we do not test on animals, because nobody does, because it's illegal to do so.
Yeah.
So you have to be so careful about claims. So that's why you've got to be really clear. And there's so much greenwashing around, particularly around natural, you know, a drip of this and a drip of that, and suddenly your product is natural. No, it isn't. So I tend to see green as a little bit broader. Clean maybe has become more in the EU about sourcing and transparency about where your ingredients come from. There's crossovers with sustainability, the ethics, the you know, and making sure that that people who are producing these ingredients are getting a fair living wage, all of that stuff. So yeah, it's not really clear. Certainly some retailers have started producing lists of what they see as clean. So it could be just about adhering to one of those.
And Art, do you have any ideas about green and clean?
Yeah, I think, again, not to belabor the point, but I think Judi, I agree with Judi. They're both sort of not well-defined categories. People look at them from their own perspective. They seem to overlap somewhat. Green sort of subsumes the environmental issues, both the sourcing, you know, non-animal, plant-based sourcing rather than petrochemical, and some aspects of biodegradability, that it's not going to harm the environment. On the other hand, clean seems to be a newer buzzword, if you would. Again, more focused on toxicity, individual toxicity, as well as maybe even advancing into environmental toxicity and what it's doing to the planet. One website that a number of my clients harks to is this environmental working group with the skin deep references, where they're grading both raw materials and finished products on a scale from innocuous on the low numbers like 1 up to very negative and on the high numbers. They have a lot of good reference works there. You really don't know what their agenda is. Unfortunately, I think we've gotten some materials with low numbers simply because there's no data out there. So there's sort of a gap. And even within our industry in the United States, we have the Cosmetic Ingredient Review, the CIR, established by our industry group, the Personal Care Product Council, and they're reviewing the literature about toxicity and aspects of irritation and carcinogenicity in the literature. But there are so many ingredients, I think we're talking about in the 66 to 70,000 raw materials by trade name that are listed in the Cosmetic Ingredient Dictionary. So we're never really going to fully evaluate the short-term and long-term toxicity of these things. So there is a stricture, and I think it's pretty global, one way or another, that the manufacturers are responsible for determining the safety of their products. So I think the consumers can be aware that, at least in a very general way, both the industry itself self-regulates, as well as the local governmental agencies, so that your cosmetics are essentially safe, both because of companies wanting to avoid liability and the government agencies monitoring that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I look at these terms, clean and green. To me, it sort of started out natural, and natural sort of morphed into green and environmental focused. They're all kind of focused on plant derived, not petroleum derived. And then what happened was marketing companies found that it's hard to make good formulas if you restrict yourself to only plant-based materials. It's just really hard. It's just reality. And they discovered if they use a few synthetic things, then they can make good products. But if they want to still claim natural, they can't really do that. So they came up with clean. So clean is, plant-based, but some synthetics to make the products work well. So that's my perspective on that. All right, how about we get into common questions that have come up, and we'll talk about the topic of, and we'll just take this topic for about 15 minutes, if there's that much time, but on the topic of preservatives. Here's one from Kanisha. She says, what is the right preservative that should be added to natural skin oil to give it a longer shelf life, especially when using something like a citrus peel?
Yeah, I think you even indicated, Perry, when I saw your responses, that what is the aspect of a citrus peel? Is it the essential oils from the orange? Is this a completely anhydrous product? And if it is completely anhydrous, I think we almost want to look at not putting any preservative in it. Of course, the watchword here is that every formulation should be challenge tested, and the difficulty with challenging anhydrous products is that the bolus of organisms that you're inoculating has some water present as well, so it may be hard to eradicate those organisms, especially if they're spore formers. So it gets a little bit dicey, but I think overall, anhydrous products, don't really need a preservative, and many of those essential oils in the citrus, as well as some others, have some antimicrobial properties. So you probably are okay as you are. It's just a matter of looking at a challenge test.
But Judi, you had some perspective on this too. A suggestion about the phyticide product.
Yeah, so we don't tend to challenge test oil-based products here because they are assumed not to support microbial growth, and as you say, the testing is kind of really difficult to do anyway.
Yeah.
But if you think there is a potential for something to grow, there is a material from elderberry that seems to be useful. So I sometimes put that into my formulations. So phyticide elderberry OS. So the OS meaning oil soluble, which is obviously helpful, and it doesn't hurt to have some nice elderberry material in there either.
Elderberry wine, really.
But yeah, you also need to think obviously about antioxidants, because most of the problems you get with oil-based products are oxidation, not any sort of preservation issues. So it can sometimes mean you've got to try 2 or 3 different antioxidant systems to find what happens, and that tends to mean stability testing sometimes for quite a few months. So it is often a good idea to put 2 or 3 different antioxidant systems on at the same time to see if there is any difference.
Yeah. Here's a question, another preservative-related question comes from David. David says, what preservative can I add instead of parabens that will give me the same degree of preservation? Bit of a big question, but we'll see what do you guys have to say about that?
Yeah, that's sort of the key question of the last 10 to 20 years. And I myself, I have to say, I'm a little bit skeptical about the issues with parabens because of, everything is a matter of dosage and use levels. But in general, I like to focus on more of the food preservatives. Many of those come from chemical moieties that are present in nature, like the sorbates and benzoates. So something like a potassium sorbate, sodium benzoate at low pHs, maybe at least below 5, hopefully, which limits you to some extent. Other materials like benzyl alcohol, phenylethyl alcohol, ubiquitous, if you would, materials that are present in essential oils seem to have antimicrobial properties. And there's a number of other synthetics that are out on the market now that are probably nearly as effective as the parabens. There's some xylitol esters, glycerol monolaurate, other materials that are on the market as natural preservatives. And you can do some searching there, look at the data that's available.
Yeah, the challenge with natural preservatives and investigating them is that a lot of the information you're going to get is from the people selling these things, and so it's a little bit of a marketing bias there. I look at as you know, green preservation goes, it's just hard. If it were easy, we would have got rid of parabens right away. It's just that's very hard, and to do that. Judi, do you have any thoughts on preservatives, the ones that you like?
Yeah, I do teach whole 3-hour workshops on this topic. So
you down to 2 minutes.
Addressing it is really tough. Yeah, I would like to sort of turn things on the head and say not focus on what can I replace what with, but actually where do you start from? What type of product are you trying to produce? Are there pH limitations? Are there texture limitations? Are there cost limitations? You know, with something with a little bit of odor, could that actually be a beneficial thing, that you get some sort of vanillic or sort of nice odor coming from the preservative, the slightly rosy odor from phenethyl alcohol, for example? Other people would say, oh no, I definitely don't want that. So you can start to cross out some of these things and then get down to a smaller list. Some of these things can be mightily expensive, and then the supplier says, well, of course you have to use 4%, and you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
After you pick yourself up off the floor.
That is an issue with more natural type of preservatives, is that they usually require somewhat higher use levels. So you've got you know, does that present a risk or a negative in your formulation from a feel or cost perspective?
Or even a stability perspective as well.
Yeah.
Here's a question from Leo. Leo is a frequent visitor to our webinars. Hello, Leo. Leo says, what preservative, if any, would be needed in a liquid soap if the pH is around 9?
Tricky one. I've just been doing something at a higher pH, because most natural formulating, as Art said, you know, you're working with things where you need to be down at pH 5. Yeah. And it starts to get more challenging the higher the pH. And I've had this question at many different things. I've got pH 7 or I've got pH 8. What do I use? And it's really hard to give an easy answer from a natural perspective. But there are naturally derived glycols now. So I'm a particular fan of naturally derived penicillin glycol. That tends to be pretty pH independent, so I've never tried it up at pH 9, but that might work. But I also use it as a preservative booster, so that can be another way of cutting your costs down by taking if you want to use one of these nice natural preservatives but you don't want such a high cost, then add a preservative booster, propandiol, penicillin glycol, any of these sort of naturally derived materials to boost the efficacy.
Yeah, I would agree with Judi that trying to get some of these glycols, which will lower the so-called water activity of your formulation and basically retard the growth and survival of microorganisms. And even that pH of 9 is getting towards the toxic potential of most commonly found microorganisms. So to work with that as well as the water activity when you have a high surfactant system, that should be a bit low to begin with. Something like those pH independent materials like the glycols and even like the alcohols like benzyl alcohol and phenylethyl alcohol would probably work in that regard as well. So it's a matter, like all of this formulation work, starting with a base and doing some trial and error. I mean, microbiological challenge testing is a little bit expensive and lengthy, but you've got to do it.
Yeah. And I know phenoxyethanol is stable up to a pH of about 10. So.
Oh yeah.
If you look at,
I know phenoxyethanol was really the go-to after we eliminated the formaldehyde donors and some of the other bad actors. we were going to phenoxyethanol, but I understand, maybe Judi, you can update us. I think a lot of the natural certifiers are negative on that regard now, or?
Yeah. So Cosmos, all of these natural standards and all the major ones don't accept phenoxyethanol because, after all, it's a synthetic. Although I would say all the organic acids that you use are synthetically produced. Yeah, they have their list that they like and the list they don't like. What they tend to say is, well, these organic acids are found in nature.
Yeah.
So we'll accept those, and there are now natural versions of those things coming out. They're probably about 10 times the price of the synthetic. So again, you pay as your money and takes your choice.
Yeah.
If you want to be totally purist, you can be. There's quite a lot of natural salicylic acid now around, so you can use that to boost the efficacy at low pH.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a tricky one, really.
Yeah, that's a whole overriding question about whether, if something is petrochemically derived or naturally derived. Even to take in a point, when we talk about natural emulsifiers, we're going to talk about ethylene oxide products, which have always had a negative aspect to them, coming from ethylene gas. But now companies like Croda have developed a presumably green-derived ethylene oxide to derivatize, and phenoxyethanol is actually an ethylene oxide adduct. So you've got a naturally sourced ethylene oxide, but it still has the inherent potential long-term toxicity problems that ethylene oxide has. So you just can't get away from that, even if it is naturally derived. I mean,
I don't think any of the certifiers, the standards, will, certainly not in Europe, accept anything that's ethoxylated. I've had this argument a few years ago. One of the big companies came out with a surfactant based on a naturally derived ethylene oxide. It got EcoCert approval for about 6 months, and then suddenly it was like, oh my gosh, it's ethoxylated.
Yeah. All right, the questions are coming fast and furious. So I think we've talked the hell out of preservatives. So I think the bottom line on natural preservatives is it's difficult. Let's move on to a different, let's try to get some of these questions that are coming in right now. This one comes to us from Swarnala. Says, I tried niacinamide serum recently and I see acne on my cheeks. I use it at 2%. I guess the point on that is, some people can't tolerate niacinamide, right?
Perry, I don't know all of the literature that's out there, but niacinamide is a water-soluble, essentially vitamin derivative like nicotinic acid. Very water-soluble. I think we can get well over 10%, and I haven't seen any literature that it's comedogenic. So I would suspect other items in the formulation besides the niacinamide. Procter & Gamble has many patents on niacinamide, and a lot of people now are using it in skincare products. It has some beneficial effects as far as vasodilation and skin lightening in some of the Middle East and Far East formulations using a lot of niacinamide. I don't think it's comedogenic.
Yeah.
But
it's one of those ingredients. It's so ubiquitous now. If it caused problems with a lot of people, like causing acne, we would see much more incidence of it. That's not to say it can't cause a problem with some individual, but that could be true of really any cosmetic ingredient.
Yeah.
All right, Judi, why don't we entertain another question here? This one comes to us from Aditi. Retinol. What are the common concerns around retinol on skin, and how safe is it to use?
Well, you're probably asking the wrong person here, because I never used retinol, because again, it's a synthetic.
Right, yeah.
A lot of people who come to me who think, and this is the same with a lot of the sorry, I'm going to say vitamins because that's the way we pronounce it, vitamins, whichever way you want to say it. People assume because it is a vitamin that it must be natural. And of course, most of these things are made synthetically, including panthenol, which everybody seems to think is also natural.
Yeah.
So I tend to look for oils or natural materials that have a high natural retinol content, which seems to be better tolerated by the skin. You have to be careful, certainly with retinol. A lot of people say you should only use it at night because of the skin sensitivity issues. As I say, I prefer to use some of the things that there's a material called Kahai oil, which is a fantastic sustainability story from Colombia that has a high natural retinol content. So does rosehip oil and a number of others, not that many actually in the plant kingdom. So I would prefer to talk about that rather than retinol in my formulation.
What's your thought on Bakuchiol, which was making all the rounds last year?
Yes, it is probably one of the number one things I'm asked about now.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm very happy to use it. There's some good science that's been done. A fair bit some of it was published in the International Journal of Cosmetic Science, which is the UK-France journal. So if people want to find that, I think some of it is probably available to download, and the suppliers will give it to you. Apparently, one of the issues is it's not China approved name. So for multinationals, it's maybe more of a problem, but for smaller companies, yeah, but it's expensive.
Just one more point on retinol that you had pointed out. In the EU, there's a maximum 0.3% use in face and hand products and 0.05% in body products.
Yeah, so it's quite limited.
Yeah. Art, how about we go into this question from Suma? It says, how do you use a SPAN 80 in a Tween 80 SPAN 80 combination as an emulsifier? And are there natural emulsifiers that could be used to make viscous emulsions?
Yeah, well, I think we're trying from a standpoint that was she looking for more natural type of formulations, Perry? Was that what she?
Yeah, I think it's related to say if you traditionally were going to use a SPAN as a solubilizer or emulsifier, what might be a natural option for replacing that?
Yeah, well, the SPANs are usually, because they're simple sorbitan esters, they would fall within, although they are synthetic, the source material is essentially vegetable in origin. So I think they would be accepted by many of the certifiers like Cosmos. But for the higher HLB, and I think we need to get into a whole discussion about the hydrophilic lipophilic balance in that combination that she cites, tween SPAN. The tweens are the ethoxylated versions of the SPANs, and those are basically restricted in most of the natural schemes. So there's both polyglycerol, in other words, polymers of glycerin, esters that are available. They're mostly food emulsifiers, and they span the range from very hydrophilic, high HLB, to low HLB numbers. Also, glycosides, in which the water-soluble portion of the surfactant is a sugar, like a glycerin, like a glucose, and then even sucrose esters themselves. So there's a wide variety of natural sourced emulsifiers that are available out there. And those are the main categories: the glycosides and glucosides, and then the polyglycerol esters, where you can make those ratios. But then you'd have to delve back into the whole idea of HLB and what requirements your formulation might have in that regard. So there's a little bit of pre-formulation work you might want to do, looking at these emulsifier combinations with your oil phase, harking back to the original ICI and Atlas Chemical discussions about HLB. So that's sort of something for maybe another whole webinar, if you would. About
a lot, many topics could be.
Yeah.
Why don't there a few questions came in about natural thickeners. So what are some of your favorite natural thickeners? I know people have asked about xanthan gum.
Yeah.
What is something specifically like a replacement for a carbomer?
Yeah, I think, and I'll let Judi get into this as well, but I think my go-to for a lot of these formulations is a xanthan combination with maybe a swellable clay like bentonite or hectorite or the trade name V-gum. There's a lot of synergy going on there. You can get good rheologies with both and helping stability. And xanthan gum, even we found, I think in some work we both did together years ago with Judi, that xanthan gum is appropriate for surfactant formulations too, where sometimes you have stability issues. I think the biggest drawback is just that at higher levels, xanthan has sort of a gummy,
gloopy,
Yeah,
gratuitous or snotty kind of rheology at high levels, but that works. Gelan is another one. There's a number of suppliers out there, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about resources towards the end, where you can find some of this information out there in the literature. But to my mind, xanthan with swellable clays is sort of the go-to for most formulations, basically non-ionic. Only in cationic systems might you have some issues with the clays, but that's sort of where I'm looking at. I don't know, Judi.
What's your thoughts on that, Judi?
Got some new stuff?
Well, yeah, xanthan gum. Oh. Not all xanthans are made equal. You have to also be careful if your client wants vegan, because again, they're not all vegan. And yeah, the rheology sometimes is very hard to deal with. So if you get somebody who comes along and wants a clear product, it's okay using it for stability. Works perfectly well. Sclerotium gum is another one. The Gums, Actigum materials can be quite good. Also may help with suspending. Lots of cellulose-based materials, cellulose gums. A more recent one I've been working with is tamarind gum. That has a lovely sort of silky, soft, almost silicone-y effect, but not a vast amount of thickening. So it depends again what you're trying to achieve. And then very recently, probably within the last couple of months, a company here in the UK, so I'll give them a plug, called Alchemy Ingredients, have come up with something called Clearfix S, which is a blend of sodium alginate and cellulose gum, and hey presto, you can get something that looks a bit like a clear carbomer solution. I have stuff on stability, so the jury's out yet on sort of how the viscosity is holding up, but actually it's looking pretty good so far. So yeah, that is the holy grail, to find the carbomer replacement in the natural world.
I think one of the resounding themes in all of this, in natural formulating, is it's hard to replace stuff that hasn't been natural for years. There aren't a lot of great options. All right, trying to get through as many questions as we can. Wow, we're already 40 minutes in, and we just scratched the surface. But we do what we can. Here's a quick, easy one from Abigail. She says, if there are no acids in a formula, is the pH going to change?
If there are no acids in the formula?
Yeah.
Wow, that's so formula specific and broad.
Well, Art, I think the easy answer is that it may or it may not. It depends on the ingredients that are in there.
Yeah, if somebody's going to hydrolyze, then you may
get some issues with materials hydrolyzing. There's also a marginal issue of the solubility of the carbon dioxide in the air, making some formulas drift a little bit to the acid side if there's not something in there that buffers it to its starting point.
Yeah.
But it's really so formula specific. Again, as Judi mentioned, hydrolysis and other decomposition of some of the materials in your product. So there is pH drift that does occur.
It definitely could happen, even if you're not using acids. All right, here's a quick, easy one from Paul. I say that quick and easy. We'll see. Do either of you use a specific software for formulation?
Ooh. Well, specifically, I think just to juggle numbers, Excel spreadsheets and workbooks is probably and I hate to plug Microsoft because they aggravate me sometimes, but that type of a spreadsheet, you can set up your formula there, look at multiples. There's a number of software on the market. I know my buddy Marie Tadal promotes it skips my mind now about the software, but there are software available out there where you can plug in your database of raw materials and use that to pull things in to your formulations. I'm not sure how expensive they are, but mostly working for smaller companies and on my own for the last 20 years, really haven't used software as a formulation tool beyond the Excel spreadsheets.
Judi, you use anything specific beyond Excel?
Good old Excel, I'm afraid. I've looked at some of these things and I've asked the question on cost. There's one called Coptis, for example, which looks really you get a lot of regulatory data in there as well.
Yeah, Coptis is an interesting one, yeah.
Yeah, I said, can we not have a special, thing for consultants? Because, multinationals can afford to buy X number of into these things. But so far, I haven't really been able to come up with something, and maybe somebody will.
Another option that you might consider looking at, there's one called Veldata. They have the same sort of software, but I think what you're going to find is, at least me personally, for individual formulators, it's really tough to just beat the Excel spreadsheet. It's free. It does the calculations for you. But if you're in a larger company and you want to do a better job of keeping track of things and for regulatory reasons, solutions like Coptis or Veldata, they might be good options for you. They just cost more.
Yeah.
Okay, we are zipping through these questions as we can. Thank you, everybody who's online. We have many more questions that we're going to be able to get to, but we'll get to what we can. Fatima says, what is a natural gelling agent to swap out carbomer? I guess we kind of already talked about that one, right? Okay, so let's go on to George's. George says, which functional ingredients is the minimum amount in order to work in the derma, or just to put it on the label? So let me try to rephrase that. People try to use a lot of active ingredients. They want to make claims. On some level, we all know that if you put a drop in, you can say that with retinol or with whatever extract is in there. But there are studies of ingredients that actually might have a function. So what is that level where you want to make sure, you want to make the claim where it actually is effective versus you want to just put it on the label?
Wow, I think you've got to go back to the the supplier data or data that's available in the literature about where the activity levels are. As you mentioned earlier, retinol, which does have potential stability issues as well, and there's many suppliers of encapsulated retinol where you can get a slow release and protection from oxidation and photo instability. But it's a wide range. Some of the peptides are considered to be effective at low levels, but I think it's also formulation dependent. So we want to look at, does that material penetrate the skin? And the skin has actually evolved to be an organ or to be a protective shield for the body to prevent penetration. So a lot of things do not penetrate.
Yeah, for good reason, too.
Yeah, for good reason. So you want to look at that as and then maybe even going to a clinical that might demonstrate what the minimum amount of an active is to get through the skin, but of course with the caveat that you don't want to exaggerate your claims to the extent of falling into the drug category, or you're going to have to perform an, at least in the United States, get involved with a new drug application. For something that's not an OTC active. I would also advise them, although it's not a real up-to-date source of data, but to look at the over-the-counter monographs in the United States, to look at certain ingredients for, let's say, anti-acne, where you would want some penetration at least into the follicles, or anti-dandruff. Look at some of those to see what kind of use levels and what kind of clinical data is used to back up, effective use levels on those over-the-counter drugs.
One thing I want to clarify here, Art, though, if you are a manufacturer of a product and you don't want to use the supplier's data to support your own claims, they can be used in a way to guide your own development, but if you're going to make claims, you've got to do the work to support those claims.
Right. The vendor information is essentially just a starting point to guide your formulation, but you're right. You've got to have your own substantiation data, and not to cast aspersions on some of our esteemed suppliers out there, but some of the data is a little bit would not pass muster if this was a new drug application.
Well, let's just say it's not. They don't publish everything that they test. All right, just so we can get to some more questions. Judi, Haley wants to know: are there any natural polymers that are going to feel like silicone elastomers? So you give a natural replacements for silicones.
Well, obviously, silicones are a big category of ingredients.
Yeah, of course.
There are replacements for everything from volatile silicones right through to the elastomers. The elastomers were the sort of difficult area until fairly recently, and then Grant Industries have just recently, in probably the last 2 months, launched their range of materials which are 100% naturally derived. I have tried them, and they do give a nice skin feel. You do have to use a pretty high level. It's Grant Scents, and there are various, designations.
Sure, yeah.
But I attended their webinar, and an interesting area where they've gone from sort of pure silicones through to part naturally derived, and now obviously trying to fill that void of things that are 100% natural. But there are many other companies also producing things that will give you a silicone, dimethicone type feel. So I think we're quite well covered in that area these days.
Yeah. I see we've got about 10 minutes left, and we've got about 1,000 questions. We'll get to however many we can, but there are a few. I'm just going to pick and choose a few here. C. Daniels has asked a few questions specifically about being an aspiring formulator, and I think one of the purposes of these webinars is really to help newcomers coming into the industry. So here's a couple of questions. What is some of the best advice you might have for an aspiring formulator, and how do you keep that creativity juices flowing in an industry that sometimes doesn't seem terribly creative, or the technology doesn't change that much?
Well, I think the technology, as Judi indicated here, even Grant, competing with themselves in looking at an alternative to those ground up microfine elastomer product for feel. They're looking at other ways to get around that, and I think the cosmetic industry has a unique position, at least in the United States, of being regulated by the FDA, but not as strenuously as the EPA regulates new industrial chemicals. Not a need for a pre-market clearance, for some of these chemistries, just some basic safety data so that the manufacturers can at least have a starting point to look at the safety of their finished products. On the other hand, though, regulatory is beginning to impinge on a lot of that innovation worldwide, and it's something we really, can't avoid in any industry, I don't think. For this, innovation. But I would suggest that people just getting into the industry basically try to network, join a company that has a philosophy of educating their work, their starting up chemists and even technicians, so that they have some options for self-education there, rather than just staying at one job for their whole career. And then network as much as you can with the IFSCC, depending on your location. Some areas, like, of course, the New York, New Jersey metro area, London, Paris, Tokyo, some areas globally have got a bigger focus on the industry, more easy to network with people. But if you can move around some of the trade meetings, like the New York Society's Suppliers Day, and in cosmetics, which are their global venues for that, place to look at, to network with people in the industry and get some data from the suppliers. So, and just like we're doing now, we've got a whole global contingent listening to this.
Yeah.
This is a great venue to, great way to get information and get contacts without actually having to physically be in contact.
And what do you think, Judi? Any advice for upcoming formulators?
Yeah, we seem to have sort of a division in some ways these days with small companies, where some people are starting in their kitchens, and I always try to say, really, kitchen should be for making your dinner, and not for making cosmetics. So if you can, and you're going to go it alone, or in a, maybe with one other person, can you make yourself a little lab, which is what I did. It's not difficult. You obviously have to buy some equipment. You've got to have the space, but have something separate where you can go and work. There's nothing like trying things, and trial and error is great. Read as much as you can, and I'll give the FCS a plug as well. They do have their diploma in cosmetic science.
So that's distance learning, yeah.
Distance learning. It's one of the gold standard courses around the world, and everybody who takes it says it was such great grounding. So do that. Do as much reading. Try to ignore some of the silly stuff that's on the internet. Read the serious stuff. Do as many courses as you can, and then just get playing and trying formulations. The suppliers have lots of formulations that you can have a go at, and sort of really just get a feel for how these things work.
One more question in that realm. Both of you have, this is kind of related, Art, but both of you have worked as formulators. You have consulting businesses, and you've probably had chances to hire other formulators. What kind of thing do you look for in people who want jobs as formulators, young people coming into the industry?
Well, I think a native curiosity is a good aspect, and an open mind to absorbing and digesting and using new information, rather than having sort of a fixed idea on how you're going to approach a problem. In the consultancy that I've got, I really am really on my own. I haven't really had the opportunity to hire anyone or to, but I have worked with, especially with the Cosmetech Group, which is one of the premier contract formulating laboratories globally, just situated in about an hour south of me here in New Jersey. And they've got a great group there, a lot of innovative formulators, and headed by Erwin Polewski, who's has a lot of experience and a keen mind, and we put together a lot of interesting programs. And Mark Chandler, probably, maybe because, and Mark has a consulting business down in Delaware, and basically nationally here in the United States. And because he's got a lot of contracts with some of the major manufacturers, he's been able to hire a lot of formulators as well. So Mark is a good contact for some people starting out. But let me just do a quick plug, as Judi did for the local society. Our Society of Cosmetic Chemists in the United States has got both online resources available through their website, scconline.org, as well as courses which are pretty inexpensive that are given both remotely and throughout the United States at pretty low cost parameters for a 1 or 2 day intensive course in any number of subjects that relate to formulation.
Yeah.
So that's interesting to look at.
And Art, don't forget your Fairleigh Dickinson program. That
Yes.
also another
the master's program there, and I think, Perry, you had in one of your books a whole iteration of all of the programs globally available.
Yeah.
I want to say the program for undergraduates in Toledo, Ohio, is very interesting as well, headed by Canada.
In Canada, they have one at Seneca College. Judi, do you have any ideas about when you're looking to hire a formulator? What kind of characteristics would you look for?
Well, I only actually, in my consulting world, have ever hired one person who's still with me, and she used to work with me in my previous life. So mind reading, I always find, is very useful, because she seems to know exactly what I want before I know I want it. But somebody likes getting their hands dirty, so she really, we actually work really well together. She does the hands-on stuff and I do the thinking. It's not to say I can't go occasionally and tinker with something, but she loves the actual making and putting it all together and finding the best method. So sometimes you need those people who really just want to get stuck in and do stuff in the lab.
Well, I see we're at the top of the hour now. Judi, in the beginning, you had mentioned the program that you were talking about. I got that slide up there. So if you want to just talk about that for a brief moment.
Yeah, so there's 2 pages to this. I'll get you to click over in a minute. So yeah, this is the first announcement, which will be going out on Monday. So this is a preview of our 32nd IFSCC Congress, where beauty, science and innovation meet. So hopefully that tagline says it all. It's where the cosmetic beauty industry, the science and the innovation all come together. And we're very much hoping by September 2022 that will be physically. We've got some great venues. The Park Plaza Hotel has a purpose-built conference suite, which we'll be using, and we'll be having some fun stuff, including an opening ceremony in a very august Central Hall, Westminster, where the many famous people have spoken in the past. So on to page 2. So our visuals for this Congress is, and we're not allowed to use the London Underground map per se, but this is our interpretation of. This is also linked to a book that the SCS is bringing out shortly, which is aimed at people starting in the industry. So a lot of these topics, you can see the different lines interact in various places. So this will be many of the topics we'll hopefully be discussing in London. There's the steering committee, of which I'm the chair for my sins, and Jem Bektas, our SCS secretariat person, who will do a lot of the admin stuff. And Dr. Tony Goff will be president in 2022, is currently on the Presidium. And Professor Majella Lane, who's heading the science committee. You can see we've got a very good range of people on the scientific committee who will be looking at the abstracts. So the submission dates There we'll be looking for abstract submission from October 2021, and we'll probably open our early bird registration in November next year. And the session themes will be around beauty for a new age, science of our time, and innovation for tomorrow's world. So there'll be many, many exotic and amazing topics, I think, coming up under that, which may even change by that date.
Yeah,
so
no,
look out for more information. There'll be a link from the IFSCC website, or it's ifscc2022.com.
Yeah, and let me interject, Terry, before you close the session out. We are actually still having our regular December National Society of Cosmetic Chemists of the United States technical meeting in December. This is I don't know if registration is quite open yet, but it's should be soon. And this will be remote over, I believe, a 5-day period, so it gives people a lot of options to participate.
I've shared a link to the annual meeting information in the chat there, so be sure to check that out. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Kevin.
Yeah.
So we're going to be talking about finalizing that program this afternoon, because I'm on the Committee on Scientific Affairs, the COSA committee, so we're going to be meeting in about 2 hours. So things will be finalized, and I think registration is either open now or will be quite shortly. So I encourage people to take a look at that, even if you're not going to be in the States, because being remote, this will give people options globally to participate.
And of course, don't forget October 21st, the 31st IFSCC Congress in Yokohama. It's going to be available virtually. You can go to the link that I shared in the chat to learn about that program too. A lot of great stuff coming up. But what's coming to an end is this question and answer session. I am so thankful to everybody who attended. And thank you, Judi, Art, for your expertise in answering. I profusely apologize to everybody that there were a lot of questions we didn't get to. We will try to get to whatever we can. If we have your email and if it's a quick answer, we can do that. But before we go, Art, how would people, if they want to get in contact with you, how would they get in contact with you?
Probably the most effective way is simply through my general Gmail, which is Georgalas, the last name, Art, no punctuation, @gmail.com. I think it's probably in the bio, right, Perry? Or
yeah, I think so. I put it in the chat there, so you can get in touch with Art there. Judi, do you have a way to contact you?
Well, I love LinkedIn, so I really would like to link in with everybody who was on this webinar. So find me there in LinkedIn. I've got an unusual name, so there's only one of me. Judi with an I, Beerling. I also have a website, pertechassociates.co.uk. And there's a contact me box there. So feel free to contact me any of those ways.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for attending. We're going to do this again in 2 weeks. Not this specific one. We're going to have another webinar in 2 weeks. I'm Perry Romanowski from the IFSCC Education Committee. Thank you, Art. Thank you, Judi. And thank you, Mary Lynn. She disappeared. And we will see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Thanks a lot, Perry. Thanks,
everybody.
Judi.
CC logo in the background. I'll do it next time. Next time will be perfect.
Exactly. Speaking of perfect, hello, everybody. Welcome to another IFSCC webinar.
Hi, Perry.
We've got Art Georgalas. Hello, Art. We've got, let's see, people coming on. Oh, look at that. Already 5 people waiting with bated breath to see us. So, hello, everybody. Welcome. We're going to get started in just over 10 minutes, about 13 minutes by my clock. I like to be timely.
You do.
Mary Lynn, how are you today? Nice and clear today. That's
nice. I'm finally unblurred.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. So if you're just joining us, let us know where you are, where you're from. Say hello in the chat box there. Also in the chat box.
Oh, we're really moving up to 15 now.
Oh,
There
you
we
just
go,
you
yeah.
just wait, Art.
It's just
Oh
going.
It's
yeah,
very exciting.
I've been on some of these seminars. I know we're getting close to 1,000 sometimes.
Yeah.
So
Excellent stuff.
yeah.
Just sipping my water. We're just waiting on Judi Beerling. She will be joining us shortly. So Art, how are you doing? Where you located, Art?
I'm in a nice little hamlet north of New York City called Warwick, New York. It's about an hour's drive up in the what's called the Hudson Valley in Orange County, New York. It's it's within driving distance to a lot of the northern New Jersey facilities for different cosmetic companies, and I'm only about an hour from the university where I'm instructing at Fairleigh Dickinson, where we have that program in cosmetic science in the School of Natural Science. That maybe we'll talk about that later, but that it's a pretty interesting program. It's been around about over 30 years.
That's the first one that I had heard about in the industry. Yeah, and it's
Actually, I did.
Kind of by
graduated from. Excuse me, Perry.
It's conducted by people who have worked in the industry, right?
Yes, right. Mostly adjunct. Let me turn my volume up here.
Sure.
Adjunct professors. A lot of us working in the industry. And that's why most of the classes are in the evening, which is advantageous for both people who have full-time positions, as well as even foreign students, international students that come in and maybe are doing something part-time or in a internship.
Yeah.
So it works out pretty well all around. And you can actually push through it in probably 2 years in the evenings. So it's not a real grueling program.
Well, yeah, I know some of the instructors there in addition to you, and it's an excellent program, especially if your goal is to get into the cosmetic industry in the formulating capacity or any other scientific capacity. The program at Fairleigh Dickinson is one of the best in the world. Well, we got some people coming online right now. Preeti from India. Hello. We've got Sarah from Israel. Paul's from France. Hello, Paul.
Paul.
And then we've got Mercedes. She was the first one who checked in, and she's checking in from Barcelona. Hope all is well in Barcelona. Still a city that I want to get to. We got Abigail from Jamaica. Hello, Abigail. And Amanda from South Africa. Well, we've got people checking in from all over the world. Yeah,
it's exciting.
Thank you for waking up early or staying up late.
Looking forward to this. This is a unique webinar for the IFSCC. We have not done one of these before. I've done question and answer sessions separately, but for the IFSCC, this is the first time. And first time Art has joined us, and Judi will be joining us shortly. We got a lot of questions sent in. By my last count, we had 38 pre-questions. So we should get to all of those.
Hopefully.
Or we'll get to as many of those as we can. If people have given us email addresses, it'll be easier for us to respond via email if it doesn't get covered on here. We got Alim from Saudi Arabia. Art, have you ever been to Saudi Arabia?
No, as a matter of fact, I haven't. I've been to UAE at Dubai. I spoke there under the auspices of the IFSCC about 10 years ago. And being on the Presidium, as I know you are now, Perry, it afforded me the chance to get to a lot of international destinations, network with a lot of people internationally, as well as speak at a variety of venues there. So it's pretty interesting. I guess you're the education chair. I was working in publicity and on the magazine. And Judi, who just joined us, was treasurer for quite a few years.
Hello, Judi. Welcome. I just want to say hello. And now,
Hello.
yeah, there we go.
You can hear me okay, I guess.
We see you. We hear you. Everything seems to be working.
Ta-da!
And Mary Lynn's there. And we are going to be answering questions at the top of the hour. But if you're just joining us, let us know where you are from and say hello. We got Jenna from North Carolina. Makuzana from South Africa, another South Africa. Gabriella from Italy. Hello. Melinda checking in from South Africa. Very well representation by the South African SCC.
Yes.
Yeah.
Welcome. Sandrine from France. And Judi, you're in the UK, right?
Yep, I certainly am.
What part of the UK are you located?
I'm down on the sunny south coast, although it's not totally sunny today. It's a place called Folkestone, not far from the Channel Tunnel, where you can go across to France.
Yeah.
When you're allowed to.
Was that the train that goes underneath?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
there's a car carrier as well.
Oh, okay. I've taken that train. It's the one from London to the other side, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Paris or Brussels, or now Amsterdam, I think.
Well, fabulous place, and we've got Aurora from Jersey. Hello.
Was that Jersey, U.S. Jersey, or Jersey, United Kingdom Jersey?
Well, that's a good question. Maybe Aurora, you could let us know whether it's New Jersey or the original Jersey.
There you go.
Is that what they call it? I do not know. Well, welcome everybody. We are going to get started answering your questions very shortly. But in the meantime, if you want to post your question, be sure to do it in the chat there. If you check it off as a question, that actually helps us identify questions that are there. USA Jersey, okay.
Thanks, Aurora. She's a Jersey girl.
There you go.
Yeah, well, that's close to my location.
Indeed. Okay, and let's see what else. So if you had questions, be sure to put it there in the chat. We got a number of questions sent in, and we're going to have just a few slides to present before we start answering questions. We're going to be answering questions for about an hour, just about an hour. But yeah, we'll be getting started shortly. But before we do that, Art, why don't you tell us, how did you get started in this cosmetic industry?
Well, it was sort of a serendipitous mixture of circumstances. As it turned out, I grew up in New York City. And at the time I was just transitioning into college, I lived in the Bronx, New York, right near the bridges into Long Island. And as it turned out, at that time, there was the Revlon Incorporated had a research center, very well known at the time. Mm-hmm. It was about a 4-story building right on the water, or right near the water there in the Bronx. And it was only a few miles from my house. And at the time, and I'm sure many of you are not familiar with the situation back in the late 60s, early 70s. But at the time, I was a biology major at City University in New York. And the positions for that kind of a degree were primarily as interns in the hospital, in which actually you had to work for nothing for the first couple of months. So as it turned out, I saw an advertisement for a position at the Revlon Research Center, walked over there and interviewed. Make a long story short, even though they said I was overqualified and being more than half through my degree, I took a position there as a technician in the color cosmetics arena, and I started working on mascara, eyeshadows, liquid makeup, and the like. And that's sort of where I began. And as time went on and I got my degree, there were no other positions in the biological field at that time, besides going into pre-med and going into medical school, that really afforded a better career opportunity. So I basically stuck with it. and moved on to another company now basically defunct called Schulten, and then into the Charles of the Ritz and Yves Saint Laurent in New Jersey, and worked my way, as you might remember, back to out to the Midwest at Dow Brands, which was where Dow Chemical had purchased a small hair care company, Lamar. I worked for them for a number of years. Then I transitioned back to the East Coast in the chemical suppliers arena at Tri-K Industries. And in a nutshell, that's where 50 plus years evaporated. And
time does go by quick. Yeah. So it sounds like you just kind of stumbled into the cosmetic industry like a lot of people did.
You'd almost say that. It's ironic that now many of my students from, and we have a global population of students from Europe, the Far East, as well as Middle East, coming in, and of course the United States and South America. We have a wide variety of students coming in with the actual objective to get into the cosmetic industry, which at that time we really didn't almost know existed in formulation, and things really have evolved.
I know I certainly didn't know when I was getting in. I only took a job in the cosmetic industry because I applied at a shampoo company. Judi, just before, so we got a minute before we get started. Judi, why don't you tell us, how did you get involved in the cosmetic industry, and specifically your work with green chemistry? Because I know you focused a lot on that recently.
Yeah, actually, it's not so recent. It's 15 years already. Where did we go to?
When did you all do that program in Chicago? Was that like nearly 10 years ago?
Yeah, 2011, something like that.
Yeah. Judi was natural before natural was green and clean.
Yeah. No, I very much like everybody else, serendipity. I decided I wanted to leave school I wasn't even quite 18. And everybody said, aren't you going to university? And I said, no, I want to go and earn some money. So I stumbled into a company that actually morphed into the largest fragrance house in the world. But yeah, in those days, they were a sort of a relatively local company making fragrances that grew into I think at one point the number 3 or number 4 company in the world. And yeah, that's where I learnt my trade. But I pretty soon realized that I didn't have much of a nose, certainly not compared to all the expert noses around me. So I decided to focus on product formulation and they sent me to back to college to do a degree in chemistry. Mm-hmm. They also subsequently paid for me to do an MBA in the 90s.
Wow.
So I did very well out of that whole, I'm not going to tell you how many years because it'll age me, but let's say that now is 2/3 of my life, and naturals is now 1/3 of my working life. So it's crazy. I kind of left that industry thinking I'll become a consultant. Naturals always interested me, and as did aromatherapy and many of the other sort of associated things. So, but I just kind of took kind of any opportunities I got to speak, and everybody wanted me to talk about what is natural. So I did my famous "What is natural" talk as many times as I could, and then the rest is history, really.
Yeah.